Well, as you know, a lot of other stories have been grabbing the headlines lately, but at the same time, there have been rumblings in the body of the Conservative Party of Canada. In May, they picked Stephen Harper's replacement, and the debate circuit has started for those who want the job. And there are a lot of them, so let's talk Tories tonight for a bit. Andrew and Chantel are here, and so is the Huffington Post's Ottawa Bureau Chief, Althea Raj. Let me give you some basic facts to start things off. Here are the 12 officially in the race so far, and they say there are going to be more. That's why we've got an area at the bottom of your screen to fit another 6 in, if that's what happens. Those are your faces for leadership. Here's some of the early sense of how things are going, at least in terms of the caucus, in terms of support that some of the leadership candidates have within caucus. That doesn't necessarily mean anything unless caucus was voting the leader. That's not what happens. But Andrew Scheer, the former speaker, is ahead on endorsements. And finally, money. This is up to the end of September. These are the latest figures we have. So a lot of the candidates aren't registering yet because they've come in since then. But you see Kelly Leitch is leading the pack there at $450,000 plus in terms of how much has been raised for her campaign. So do those things tell us anything necessarily, Andrew?
Not too much, in that there's still a long way to go in this race. But yeah, I think you can see there's starting to emerge maybe a sort of a first tier and a second tier of the candidates. So Bernier, Chong, Leitch, O'Toole, maybe Lisa Raitt, I'm missing one, would be in the sort of top tier, and then the others are looking like they're second rank at this point.
I don't think that the campaign has started to gel in any way, shape, or form, or at least that the boards we showed here show much of anything. Fundraising, a lot of the candidates who've just come in have not reported yet on how much money they've collected. Take Kelly Leitch, because I think that's interesting. Her numbers are really high. But she collected a lot of money from former progressive conservative people who saw her as one of theirs before she went into this value testing. I'm, on the same wavelength as Donald Trump on immigration, etc. And you've seen some of them publicly pull back. Yeah. So you should not make from these numbers a sign that she is necessarily on a roll. Caucus support, Andrew Scheer has a lot, but it's very regionally based. He's from Saskatchewan. There are a lot of Saskatchewan MPs, conservatives, and many of them, and from Alberta, are behind him. In this campaign, you need to win across the board because every riding is worth the same point. So you can do really well in Saskatchewan, but if you're not doing well in Ontario and Quebec, you're nowhere.
You're right about Kelly Leitch. Her roots in the party were Red Tory roots, but Red Tories are not entirely happy with her these days for the reasons we've mentioned. Althea, you've actually been to some of these. You were at one of the kind of unofficial debate last week. What's your take on where things stand here?
Well, I think I agree with both of my two panelists in the sense that it's too early to say. What the numbers really show us is who's liked by caucus, who was out early and started fundraising, and who had a sort of organizational advantage, people like Max Bernier, who've been planning this for the last couple of years. But that doesn't always work, as we saw with Tony Clement, who pulled back because he didn't have any fundraising numbers. My take on this race is that there are 3 camps that are starting to gel. There are the people who want to grow the Conservative tent. There are people who want to keep the Conservative tent, who think that Stephen Harper's plan was the best plan and we need to just keep going with Stephen Harper's plan, just maybe have a happier, smiling leader. And people who want to restrict the tent. And that's not to say that they're not going to grow the Conservative Party's base by getting new members, people like Kelly Leitch, people like Brad Tross, who might get some social conservatives in to buy memberships. But I don't think that they are going to be able to grow the Conservatives' tent with the rest of the electorate.
I might divide it slightly differently, but I think you can divide it in 3 groups as well. I would classify it as there's candidates who are going down the sort of free market route, Bernier and Chong, or revealing a lot of policy. There's the candidates who are going down the more identity route, like Stephen Blaney and Kelly Leitch, and emphasizing those types of issues. And then there's there's candidates like O'Toole and Raitt, where it's mostly I'm likable, I can win, I'm inoffensive, and we may hear more from policy from them, but we're not clear. The interesting thing to me in all those classifications is Andrew Scheer, because I think he sort of can fit into each of those boxes in different ways. He's got a bit of the social conservative, a bit of the economic conservative, a bit of the likability factor, so he's hard to classify.
But I'm not sure we've ever covered a leadership campaign for one of the main parties that has been quite like that, in the sense that if you look at these people, they are virtually unknown to a large section of the Conservative membership in the country. Andrew Scheer could safely walk downtown Montreal and not ever get bugged by anyone about his policies.
Maybe not just Montreal.
Lisa Raitt in some regions of the country is also equally unknown. So you know, the Mulroney versus Claude Wagner that produced Joe Clark, or Ignatieff versus Ray, there were people in there with national profiles. They have profiles, and some of them are interesting candidates, but it's a completely different ballgame. And while I agree with whichever way you want to split those groups, I don't think Conservative members themselves have even started to contemplate which of these person represents what he or she wants, because none of them has jumped out at them as, yeah, you know, this person is really over and above the rest of the field.
But that's what you've been seeing in the early going, is candidates trying to get out there and stamp an image, trying to get a bit of name recognition. So when Kelly Leitch came out with the Canadian Values thing, that vaulted her from utter obscurity into being more of a lightning rod, either pro or against her. And similarly, Maxime Bernier has been out unveiling a lot of quite radical policies. So they're trying to break through that massive indifference.
But they need second. See, this isn't going to be won on the first ballot. There's no one is going to come up with 51%, and it's a ranked ballot. So when you vote, you're going to be saying, "I want my number 2 choice, my number 3 choice." So yes, you want to, like Kelly Leitch, stand out. But if you polarize and you end up being nobody's second choice,
that's right,
you have actually shot yourself in the foot. It's a tough, strategically complicated campaign to execute.
This issue that Andrew points out, that most Canadians wouldn't know any of these candidates. Is there an assumption that there still are people out there of name that could get in this race?
Of name?
Yeah, that the Canadians would recognize.
No, nobody's names that are being bandied about. Rick Peterson and Pierre Lemire, I don't know that most people know who those people are.
Kevin O'Leary?
Kevin O'Leary, I don't think he's actually going to be joining this race. I think he wants to play a role of a kingmaker if he can, but he doesn't even seem to understand the basic rules of how this leadership race is happening. I think he just likes the profile. He has a TV gig going. I'm sure he doesn't really...
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Where have we heard that kind of story?
Not to insult
really
your profile,
don't.
but Kevin O'Leary is a non-starter in the second largest province in terms of weight, and that is Quebec. And anyone who cannot speak French is going to be faced with the reality that the second heaviest lot in that box is going to come from Quebec. So yes, Kevin O'Leary can safely walk down the streets of Rimouski.
Okay, I think we got your point.
As long as he doesn't need to order anything.
You could say that about a lot of the leadership candidates.
Yes,
Yeah.
but that makes them, I think, automatically that pushes them out of the first year.
So there's no sense that those who have said they're not getting in, you know what we're talking about, McKay, there's no
McKay
reconsideration
no.
of any kind going on.
No.
not that any of us heard of.
No. People went to Gérard Deltel, who's been the leader of the ADQ in Quebec, and asked him to run. And as far as I know, he once again declined. And I think that all of these others were re-asked, and I think they all re-declined.
How much of the reason for this is the fact that the polls still indicate, you know, in terms of the popularity of the current government, just a year in, that Trudeau has a significant lead, and that there are some people sitting back saying this is not the time to go.
Oh, sure, and that's often the way, is the people who are looking for the sure thing are looking at this going, oh, there's no way we can win. But we also know there's all kinds of stories from political lore of people who got in when it looked like you couldn't possibly win, and lo and behold, the times changed and they were rewarded for their entrepreneurship. The other thing, of course, is, and you see this in every presidential cycle in the States, every presidential race begins with the media writing stories about the 7 dwarfs. Who are these people? Nobody's ever heard of them. The virtue of a long campaign is we will find out about these people. We will learn about them. They will either grow, both in our own view of them and in their abilities in the course of this long campaign, or they won't. So they may look very different to us 6 months from now.
Pierre Trudeau was not considered a star at the very beginning of the campaign. He had very little caucus support. He seemed to be coming out of left field, literally, at the beginning,
Right.
the early stages.
But as we said, caucus support.
And
No, but in those days, they were
Yeah.
delegated conventions, so it mattered with
Joe
the
who?
establishment.
Joe who?
would be one of the more famous examples.
Althea, is there a sense, is there a theme at all of what conservatism may look like moving forward here, from the discussions that you're hearing here?
Well, I think to just harp back on those three themes, and in some ways there's some overlap with Andrew, I agree. But I think that, Michael Chong has put forward this vision. He's in favor of a carbon tax. He's the only candidate on stage who wants to have a carbon tax. He wants a flatter tax code, but he also wants to expand the party. He wants to have free membership. He really talks about growing that tent. And then you have other people, some candidates that have been dismissed by other people like Deepak Oberoi or Brad Trosts, who really view this as a more restrictive, no, we need to be more in touch with the grassroots, but we don't really need to change what we're selling. And we're still hearing that from a lot of people like Lisa Raitt, like Andrew Saxton and Chris Alexander. Most of these people, I'd say right now, are in the mushy middle because they haven't explained policies. You have Max Bernier out there trying to distinguish himself with free market as well. I want to end supply management. I'm going to have a flat tax, vote for me. And then you have Kelly Leach and to a certain degree, Stephen Blaney as well, who are really selling what I think is very dangerous politics, trying to get those fundraising numbers out. And I think that their point is that they want to try to win on the first ballot. And to Chantal's point, you can actually technically, I'm going to fit a lot of stuff in this answer. Yeah. You could win on the first ballot, except that it's hard.
Yeah, you've got to be a front runner to win on the first ballot.
And everywhere.
We're out of time. What a surprise. But look, thank you. We were shorter than normal tonight, but it was really good. If you want to see lots more of that issue, go to our Facebook page right now, because earlier this evening, Chantal and Andrew did a Facebook Live, and it went for almost an hour. It was a lot of great questions from our viewers, so you can find it on our Facebook page.